But the number one way I've been able to scale that I recommend for everybody, you still got to understand how to operate the real estate. You still got to be able to take the business that you bought on day one and figure out how to make the business more valuable.
Welcome to the Multifamily Wealth Podcast. I'm your host, Axel Ragnarsson, and on this show, I dissect how seasoned multifamily investors started, built, and scaled their businesses. What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode here on the Multifamily Wealth Podcast. This week, I'm chatting with Logan Rankin, who is one of the most successful multifamily investors that I have ever had on the podcast, that I've ever had a chance to interview. And I honestly think that this episode is one of the best episodes that we have ever released on this podcast feed. And it's for a multitude of reasons. First and foremost, Logan just has an incredible resume. The highlight, and it's going to be in the title, I'm sure, is that he has built a portfolio of over 4,000 units with no partners, no investors over the last 10 plus years. I think roughly 11 years ago is when he bought his first building. And it's an incredible testament to his ability, one, to buy great deals, two, to operate them effectively, and three, to really delay gratification and to really pour all of the proceeds and all the cash flow and all of the returns back into the business. And in this episode, we chat about some high-level topics such as selling properties versus holding forever, how he determines what he wants to buy, how he's really built his business to actually manage all of these properties because he manages everything in-house. And we spend a lot of time in this episode, and this is where we get really tactical, talking about his entire value-add process and really what his business looks like from an operational standpoint. Some of the high-level things we discuss are KPIs he tracks when he leases and really what he cares about on that side of the business. How he actually has built the organizational side of his business in terms of hiring and developing the actual management infrastructure. And one of the biggest topics that we discuss is how he renovates buildings so rapidly. He's well known for just turning units in 72 hours, and we dive into the process that he follows and his team follows to actually turn a vacant unit in 72 hours, and he literally outlines the exact process that he's developed and that he follows and that his crews follow to take a unit from a tenant gives them notice that they're going to vacate all the way up to the day that tenant vacates, how they turn that unit in 72 hours, what the actual team looks like, what their different renovation packages look like. I mean, it's just a masterclass in multifamily operations in this episode. I learned a ton of things. I mean, just again, I can't really speak enough about this episode of the podcast. If you are a multifamily operator, if you're an LP that wants to better vet how active investors that you potentially are going to invest with actually operate buildings, I think you're going to find a lot of value in this episode as well. So, everyone should be listening to this. One of the best episodes that I think we've recorded, and that's me being a nerd about multifamily operations. But again, I think everyone's going to take something away from this. So please give this one a thorough listen. And if you enjoyed this episode, please leave the podcast a rating and review. And share it with someone in your network who you think might enjoy it. Because again, if you're in multifamily, I'm sure you know other people that are in multifamily. And if you enjoy this podcast, I'm sure they would too. So we greatly appreciate you sharing it with other folks in your worlds. But without further ado, let's get to this episode with Logan Rankin. What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode here on the Multifamily Wealth Podcast. Joining me this week is Logan Rankin, an incredibly successful investor, somebody who's built a portfolio in a different way than I think a lot of folks nowadays as it relates to raising capital, syndicating equity, leveraging other people's capital, or partnerships in general. And he's done it the old-fashioned way, just repurposing his own capital, recycling his own cash, and organically growing a very large portfolio. And I think this episode is going to be extremely eye-opening and tactical for a lot of the folks listening. So excited to get into this. But Logan, why don't you share a little bit about your background, maybe what you were doing before you got into real estate, and then give the spark notes as it relates to your real estate business career and what you're up to today.
That sounds good. Thanks for having me on, Axel. I appreciate it. Yeah. So before real estate, I spent a decade working for a Fortune 50 company. I worked for Target Corporation, was able to work my way up, started as an intern actually. And I was in a lot of various different leadership roles. So got to learn a lot about leadership, got to learn a lot about operations and process. And then I got to learn about like managing large P&Ls. At one point, I got the opportunity to lead 19,000 people, oversaw 3.5 billion worth of sales. Just got some really, really cool opportunities at a young age, working for a Fortune 50 company. And, that not everybody takes that path, but I really feel like that helped me in my next chapter of my business career, which obviously was, developing and building real estate related companies as well as my own holdings. And my second chapter was real estate, started in 2013. I was accumulating more and more wealth, and I started to realize that I wanted more control over that wealth. My mom was a teacher, my dad coached and worked in a factory. We just, we weren't really brought up in real estate, and I didn't know anybody that was wealthy. So you read enough books, though, you understand that if you want to put your money, into a place that obviously can, that you can have more control over, that you can have that cash flow now, real estate is a really good sector for that. So in 2013, we bought a single family house. My wife and I saved up for over 2 years to buy that first house. And we still own it, actually. And underwrote the deal, managed the deal, promised my wife. That's a big part of it, is making sure you're both on the same page. And with us not having anybody that we knew in real estate and putting all of our savings for 2.5 years into this first property, it was very important that it went well. And we underwrote it. I forget the exact numbers, but it was around $3,200 is what we underwrote it for. A year goes by, it produced something around $3,100. So we're within $100. And I was addicted from there, man. So from there, the next year I bought a duplex. So doubled the amount of units. The year after that, I bought 2 duplexes. And I really just started scaling. Scaled that from, I self-managed to 7 units. Then it was just too much with working 70-hour work weeks in my leadership job. So then I had a third-party management company from 7 units to 252 units. And at about that point, there was enough cash flow coming in, because it's not what you make, it's what you keep, from the real estate portfolio that I was barely working in. And I started to realize that the reason I kept getting promoted at my corporate job was because I was pretty good with people. I understood systems and how those relate to driving a P&L. And that's what a lot of property management is. And, with 252 units, that was enough to start the property management company. So I started that in 2019, started with 4 people. And then built that company from 4 people to today. If you include part-time, it's about 150 people. We have a construction arm, which is a pretty big part of that headcount. And I also grew my portfolio to 4,086 units. And what's unique about that is I own all the equity in that. So I've never had a partner in that holding portfolio, never done a syndication, and have been able to, scale with some great opportunities and utilizing the construction and property management company to do that.
Yeah, I mean, it's what an incredible story. And there's any number of avenues that we could go down. We could talk about how you've sourced deals, how you've financed deals, right? Because you're obviously the equity here. We could talk about operations, and I know we're going to spend a good chunk of this episode on operations. But before we get into the weeds from an actual tactical standpoint as it relates to operating properties, building the PM company, the construction side, I know many folks listening are going to be like, that's one, that's ridiculous. That's insane to build a portfolio like that with your own cash, especially over really just a decade, right? A 10-year period of time, more or less. And I guess just high level, easy question right off the top. I mean, maybe it's not easy. Maybe you've deliberated, on this topic over the years, but why no partners? Why no investor capital, right? Was there a deeper reasoning behind that?
Yeah, so the reason has changed. So in the beginning, the reason is because I didn't know anybody wealthy. Like my family wasn't wealthy. We didn't know any friends wealthy. I didn't know anybody in real estate. So honestly, who is going to give me money, when I didn't know anything about real estate managing, etc. So I just did it all myself. That's why so I started slow. Everybody sees how many units I have now, but everybody forgets that it took me 3 years to buy 7 units. So it took me a long time. And that's just the way I learned. I really like to understand the operations behind things, like how to optimize things and create a great business for the people that live there, but also a profitable for the person that owns it. So in the beginning, to answer your question, is I had no business raising money because I didn't know anything of what I was doing. I needed to learn it first. And then by the time I learned it, my reason changed. I'm like, holy shit, this is really hard. Managing and operating a property is really, really hard. And I felt it was much easier to find money than it was to operate the property. So in my head, I'm like, if I'm going to do all the work, if I'm going to hold the property management company accountable, when I had the third party. And if I'm going to build my own management company, like you can't literally pay me enough to do that. So if I'm going to work so hard to operate it right and reposition this asset and utilize my processes that I've built and the people that I've trained, then I want to and take all the risk. Then I want the reward that comes along with it too. So my reason changed is instead of spending all this time looking for money, I spent a ton of time looking for how to operate my properties better. And that has really helped me continue to scale. And when I retired too, Axel, I would just tell you, like, I just didn't want to work for somebody anymore. And I know, like, when you have investors, they're technically working for them, but you are. Like, you got to answer to them. And we'll get into this later, but the style of properties that I was buying, I just knew there'd be a lot of questions. I was taking risk, and I didn't want to spend all my time explaining to them why I'm taking this risk and why I'm doing the things that I'm doing, because I knew that would just slow me down. And I wanted to focus all of my time on how do I create speed and velocity. And if I make a mistake, I just felt so much better that it was my money at risk and not somebody else's.
Yeah, without a doubt. And just for context too, I forgot to mention it after you discussed your background. Where in the country are you? Where are you operating?
Wisconsin.
Wisconsin, perfect. So the follow-up question to growing a large portfolio with your own capital, something that I've faced, something I'm sure a lot of the listeners who are actively growing a portfolio with their own dough are probably facing, is how you responsibly allocate your cash as you're growing both your portfolio, but you also have to grow a business to really support that, right? And there's staff, and there's, you're balancing earnest money deposits on new deals, capital going into renovations on this deal. Maybe you're making an internal hire, an admin assistant, whatever. Cash is going in a lot of different areas. And then when you take a deal done, it's not as if it pays you right away, at least in the value add game, right? You're spending money before you're stabilizing and before the money starts coming back. And especially if you're trying to do a higher volume of deals, it can get really stressful to kind of manage all of the different places that you're sending money. And I think that's oftentimes why a lot of people just go out there and raise the money, because it makes it easier to control their own cash. And then you also pick up some fees too in the capital raising game, right? You maybe get an acquisition fee, an asset management fee, helps to create a little bit more predictability in revenue. So with all of that being said, kind of setting the stage there, how did you think about all of that as you were growing your portfolio? And did you ever run into a situation where that became a challenge, or, just did the snowball kind of start rolling in a sense that necessarily wasn't really a real challenge at any point? But how did you kind of balance where your cash was going and how you actually, spread it around as you were growing so rapidly?
Yeah, that's a great question, man. So I would say I've always been ultra organized, and I feel like you've got to be in the value add game, especially when you stack deals. Like, I mean, there's been times I've been repositioning 15 different deals, 1,500 units at the same time. Like, it's a lot happening. I actually, behind me, not that this is a shameless plug, but I wrote an entire book on like organizing your financial future and how just important that is. The amount of people I meet in the real estate and business game that are not organized with their own personal finances is just ultimately super scary. So I would tell you, I'm really organized, and you don't need to be yourself, but then you need an accountant, or you need an EA, or you need somebody to help keep you organized. So it is a challenge as you're scaling too. Like, anybody that's done significant value add deals knows that there's a burn rate that's associated with it as well too. And when you really get going, like, when I was somewhere between 500 to 1,500 units. And if you look at, like, I've posted this, on Twitter and other social media, like, you can see the scale start to happen after I started the property management company. And some of those years is just like really spiked. So, the cash flow itself from the units that were stabilized have to be able to cover the future properties that are not stabilized. And then I think one of the secrets that we might talk about later, but one of the secrets of the way, it's not a secret, but one of the business strategies I deployed to be able to help with my cash flow or my burn rate, and just to be honest, help me scale, is to reposition these properties faster. A typical investor can take a 100-unit apartment complex and rehab every single unit and the exterior, et cetera. That's going to take them 3 or 4 years. We are consistently doing it in like somewhere between 6 to 12 months. So like 300 to 400% faster through some of our processes. Well, obviously, what does that do? Well, the burn rate, or the risk that you just asked me about, is it's not burning as long, right? It's a shorter period. which also helps you hit the refi event. And if you do things right and you've bought a great property at a great basis and now it's worth a lot more, there's the opportunity to refi that money out tax free, which helps fund future deals. So I did a lot of that, Axel. It's really just understanding that you got to be super organized, but you also have to have control over the speed of which you go into and execute these repositions. I mean, we can talk about this later too, but we can rehab full gut job unit in 72 hours. Like, a lot of my competition is rehabbing these units in 60 to 90 days. That's a huge advantage on things like vacancy, right? And the amount of times that you're replacing the resident and getting somebody in there at market rent. So your loss to gain is significantly improving. But there's some of these processes within our business then, and most of them draw back to speed. And speed, in my opinion, reduces risk.
Yeah, 100%. And this is the perfect segue because this is where I wanted to go next as well. And everyone listening, he just talked about doing full gut renos in 72 hours. We're going to come back to that. But I think that there's only so much time that you can spend early in your business or I should say, you only have so much time and you can only spend it in so many different places when you're starting and when you're trying to rapidly grow. And I think a lot of successful investors that I see, at least early, and you're probably doing both of these now at scale. So you're touching both of these, is you're there spending a lot of time finding incredible deals and investing time doing that, whether it's direct to seller marketing or you're really being diligent with brokers. That's kind of your special sauce, and you're buying a deal at 10-15% below market value. You're creating some value and you can pull your equity out quickly. That allows you to turn your cash very quickly, right? The other side, at least in a lot of these successful investors I know that grew quickly, maybe they're still buying good deals, but not like, insanely discounted deals. Maybe they're still buying primarily broker deals, but they're crushing the operational side. They're leasing for top rents. They're leasing quickly. They're renovating quickly, renovating, below what other competitors are renovating for. There's maybe some other special sauce from an operational standpoint that's allowing them to maximize the performance of the property. And they're drilling a higher NOI in a shorter period of time. And then that allows them to pull cash out quickly, right? The killer investors are doing a combination of both, which I'm sure you're doing. And we're going to spend time talking about the operations here in the next handful of minutes. But in general, that's just a framework to think about, okay, so we can maximize value in a couple of different ways. And it's just a matter of where you're spending your time and building out your process. So let's talk about the operational side, though, and we'll start with that 72-hour comment that you made, which is insane because you're right. It does take most people at least 30 days, if not 60 plus days, to do a full gut renovation, if we're talking kitchen, bath, paint, flooring, fixtures, etc. Doing that in 72 hours is ridiculous. So maybe talk about some of the infrastructure that you've developed that allows you to actually execute on that timeline. And I also just selfishly would love to learn how you kind of got there over time too, in terms of like when you started bringing, I'm assuming you have folks in house, when you brought them in house, and what it actually looks like now.
Yeah, that sounds good, man. So I think what makes me a little bit unique too is because, right, I wasn't spending a ton of time looking and going out and finding partners and having to explain myself. So that is an advantage because I think that's real. If you're syndicating a deal, there's a certain amount of attention that you have to put together to everything you send out. And so I spent all my time on what, I don't like doing things over and over, which is why I got really good at building systems and processes. Because if I had a really good system and I could put a person in that system, right, then they would be able to do the repeatable process over and over and we could get elite results. So I think it starts with like, I bet there's not too many people that own over 550 million worth of real estate and could tell you or had the opportunity, I should say, or maybe it's not an opportunity that has done delinquency, has done accounting, has done the turns, there's not a single thing in the process. I don't do it anymore. Now I just manage one person, a president, and another person that runs a construction company. But like, I had to get a really deep understanding of what does the process look like? And then I built it from scratch because what I realized in this industry is there's not a lot of operators that own a lot of real estate. So they just haven't taken the time to break down the process itself. So all of our process break down like this, Axel, and then I'll get into the 72 hours or any other process you want to get deep with is first, right? We learn the very best way to do something. And then we break it down step by step by step. So we literally write out every single step. And until we're certain that step is the best way to do it, which is not that hard. Like, for example, one of the things you have to do when you rehab a unit, right, is you got to rip out the flooring, you got to put in new flooring. So like I remember when we're looking at the best way, we use luxury vinyl plank. We want our flooring to last, 10 plus years. We're pet friendly. It's very important that it's like premium and can hold up against, bigger dogs and all that stuff. Anyway, so you find the right material, but then you also you could Google this. You probably can chat GBT this now. But what we did is we just found the 3 best people that all they do is put in flooring, and we hired them and we watched them, right? And we found the very best way to put in flooring. And then that became our best practice. So it's not, hey, like put in flooring however you want. It's no, this is the best way to put in flooring. This is the way we'll always put in flooring. So it's done the exact same way. So the first thing you do is you find the best way and then you write out every single step. Second thing we do is we create a video because people are visual, right? So if you hired somebody, they can read about putting in flooring, but they can actually see the very best way to be able to put in flooring, or when you need to cut, or, material waste, whatever. And then the last thing we do is we certify them. And we do that through, okay, first you're going to watch the person do it. Then you're going to do it with the trainer. And then you're going to do it while the trainer watch you. And if you do all that right, now you're flooring certified, or you're certified on that step. So I just before we even get into things, we're very meticulous about creating a great standard operating procedure and then training. And then once they're certified, one of the coolest things we do in our company is we assign a scoreboard and sometimes even incentives, so that everybody across the company can see how that process or those results that the process is trying to drive are doing. And that's a big part of what we do. In fact, we do it on the with the rehab team. So let me get a little bit into the rehab teams, and then it's a long process. It's 18 different steps, but let's start with the first step. Right, a resident puts in a 60-day notice, so they want to move out. What our company that goes to our legal team, and then the legal team will make sure that they put in the right move out notice, right? The right legal structure. And then we have an engagement specialist reach out and, try to figure out why they're leaving in the first place. We have 72 hours to do that. So everybody, it has a person and has a timeline. We want to figure out, if there's a way to be able to save that resident. Maybe they're moving to a different city with a job and they didn't realize we have housing there. So I would tell you, the best way is to keep the resident, but they have 72 hours to do it. If that person is moving to a different state, we don't have property in, then they put that unit in what we call the queue. Once it's put into the queue, we have a construction specialist that then schedules a pre-inspection. So this is something that I noticed when I didn't have a management company. Is what normally happens is someone puts in a 60-day notice, 60 days go by, the unit's empty. Then the property management company walks the unit. It's like, oh shit, we got to replace these cabinets. We got to do this. We got to do that. Right. So they put all that, they go walk it. They put it all together. 3 days goes by. Right. Then they send it to the owner. The owner looks at it. They reviews it. They hem and haw. Another 3 days goes by and they finally approve it. Then once they get approved, they find the general contractor. General contractor says, well, I can't get in there for 2 weeks. Finally, they get in there. Then the general contractor says, oh, we're missing material. That's going to take another 2 weeks, right? Typically, at least in the Midwest, it's like on your very best day, it's going to be a 30-day rehab process, but most likely 45 to 60. I'm like, this is crazy. This is causing so much vacancy loss, right? It's taking so much longer to reposition the asset. It's all my money that's tied up. So I said, well, again, why don't we just do a pre-inspection before the resident even leaves? So obviously it's put in the queue. There's 57 days left. From day 57 to day 50, so there's 7 days. The construction specialist would notify the resident that there's going to be a pre-inspection, and then our construction leader would go walk that unit, Axel. So they walk that unit with their iPad. We have a sheet of paper. We only do 4 kinds of rehabs. We're like a car wash. We do a silver package, an elite package, a gold package, and a platinum package. Maybe we can talk about that later, but it's all the same because, making sure that the company understands what we're selling and what we're doing, is very important. We use the same materials. It just helps our teams. It speeds everything else up. But anyway, we go in there and we notify what package it's going to be based on the condition of the unit. Obviously, if it's like an eviction, it's trashed, we're most likely going to do a gold standard, which is we're literally rehabbing everything. Maybe it's not so bad though, and maybe it's like a light flip. We just basically decide what needs to be done. On day 50, that pre-inspection is brought back to the office, right, or sent in through the iPad, and then we are sending that to our suppliers. So our suppliers can order all the materials 50 days before the tenant even moves out. That's why we don't have material issues. And then it is also scheduled with the turn team. We have 22 turn teams now. We started with one, but we have 22 turn teams. And so obviously we want to make sure that is scheduled so that on the day that they move out, all the material shows up at 12:01. Our turn team is there, right? They can go at it. What else is happening is we post the unit. So we post the unit 50 days before they're gone, right? We're trying to rent this because we know how fast it's going to take the rehab. So when we can get in there, we can rehab that once it's empty. 3 days later, the fourth day, we can get a new resident in. And we can do that because all the units look exactly the same, depending on the package. So if you always do a gold standard package with the same flooring, the same cabinets, the same everything, like the same mirror, the same fixtures, and we have an entire brand division that does construction programming. They go into new construction, they take those ideas, and then we put that into our 1970s to 2000 vintage apartments. But it's just over and over. So the leasing agent knows what they're selling. The rental tech or the crew captain knows how they're rehabbing it. Right. The brand team member knows how to post it. So all that matters in the steps. So there's a few more steps. And then anyway, we speed all the way up for the sake of this podcast. We speed up to like the day of the turn. And the first thing that we do there is very important that the crew captain is checking the materials list to make sure that everything was done the right way. And then while he's doing that, we always have a rental tech 2 and we have a rental tech 1, right? So a rental tech 1 is like a newer team member, and they're going to do things like the easy stuff, right? Ripping out all the floorings, part demo, and then they're going to do things like trim and luxury vinyl plank, the easy stuff. The rental tech 2 is doing things that are a little bit more complicated. He got promoted, right? He got promoted over time, and now he's doing things like the bathroom, right? So you might have some plumbing stuff. We always remove the toilets to put energy efficient toilets and shower heads and so on and so forth. And then the crew captain's doing probably the most complicated stuff. And it's like hanging cabinets, electrical work, fixtures, etc. You just got to remember, like I only do apartments, only multifamily, and they're just boxes. So like it's actually not as complicated as people think. Like there's everything that you do over and you do over and you do and over again. So if you have time goals for everybody that are set, if you have all the materials and they're trained the right way and certified, as I said, it creates a ton of velocity. Of course, painting and cleaning overnight, and there's different things that you can do on your own, depending on how big you are, to really speed that process up. And then, so then they go at it. The construction leader checks in on them. Obviously, if there's any delays, they let them know right away. We do have a demo specialist. He's kind of like a runner. So he can go get materials, obviously, just help them stay on time. And then what's probably important step to skip to, I would say, Axel, is I talked about at the beginning of this, every good standard operating procedure has visibility around a scoreboard and incentives. Well, this is a really big process. Like we call it the turn life cycle, the life cycle of turning over a unit. So we have a scoreboard that measures quality, that measures speed, and that measures cost. And how we do that is for quality, in a single month, if any resident moves into a unit that you did, then and calls us back, oh, there's a scratch in the trim, we don't like this, come back, or is just not satisfied with the unit, they cannot have a single one to receive 33% of their bonus. So our bar for quality is very, very high. Last year, we finished at a 98.5%. So for every 100 residents that are moving in, we're only going back for 1.5% of them. It's so high, by the way, that we actually guarantee that you'll be happy with the unit when you walk in, or you can rip up your lease within 14 days and we won't charge you anything. There's no penalty. There's no nothing. Like, wow. You're paying good money for a unit. We're going to guarantee that you're going to love it. And our bar for quality is just very high. It smells good when you walk in. Like, we make sure of it, got a nice little basket, but most of all, it's very detailed because every single turn team's receiving an extra bonus, right? So they can't have any. So our quality is very high. Obviously, the second part of their bonus. They can receive another 33% of their bonus if they hit their speed goals, which we've kind of talked about. And then same with costs. And they definitely affect cost, right? If there's delays, if they don't put in the LVP the right way, for example, or break a cabinet, obviously we got to order more. So, a lot of that waste really goes into how they do things. And it's more than just the bonus they receive. And we do it kind of cool, by the way. And anybody that's listening to this can steal this. Our crew captain gets 50% of the bonus. The rental tech 2 gets 30% of it, and the rental tech 1 gets 20% of it. Well, we do that on purpose too, right? So, first of all, you got to hit quality, speed, and cost to get all of your bonus as a crew. But then on top of that, if you get all of it, it's split based on percentages, and it inspires the rental tech 1 to want to learn and get certified on the things he needs to get certified for to become a rental tech 2 one day. And the rental tech 2 is learning from the crew captain. And we even give the crew captains extra incentive to promote crew captains, because most of our teams are internal. We have 18 of the 22 teams. I think it's 18. I would have to double check, but the majority of our teams are actual employees, not 1099 crews. And a lot of that had just come from incentives and inspiring people to get certified so they get paid more. And I think that's really important. And then there's a fun component to every good standard operating procedure, by the way. And I know I'm belaboring this. I try to skip a few steps, but I love this shit.
Keep going. This is incredible. Yeah.
Yeah. So all of them have team names, and the crew captain gets to pick the team names. So one of our highest quality teams right now are called the Beef Sticks, right? That's their name. And so we got these crazy names across the 22 different teams. And we use Slack, but they all have the Slack. And, we have 5 different regions in our company right now. And it's important to be the best crew when on any given month for the entire company. And then within your region, how Team Beef Sticks has our highest quality streaks. They have something like 111 straight move-ins where they have not, think about this, did not go back for anything after you've rehabbed. Our average, we have over 200 DPCIs, actual items that we put on a pallet that we do for these renovations. It's a lot. You're completely renovating a unit. It's a lot to not screw up. So to have streaks, like some of these guys have streaks, but it's not even about our best teams, they do care about the money. I think that's important to say, but I would tell you they care more about being the best team and the bragging rights and the traveling trophy that comes along with. So there's just a lot of, if you build a process just to drive a result for your company, I think you will not get the elite results unless you think about, well, what's in it for the people that are in the process. And we want people that are prideful. We want people that are driven for greatness. And we want to make sure that they earn more when we earn more. So that is why our speed's so high. To answer the question, Axel, it's not just because we have a really good, process that is, 18 steps with details underneath each of them. And I shared a majority of them with you just now. It's because we focus a lot on the end result, the visibility around that. And I'll end with this. Our director of HR used to say this. When I first said, everybody's got to see how they're doing, because undoubtedly you're going to have a different team, right? That sucks, that had a bad month, that is not doing good, or even individual team members. Because obviously we have this, same kind of standard operating procedures with our service techs, for example. We got 14 service techs, and they get scored on everything. And by the way, for the last 4 months, we've done every work order in 48 hours or less, 100% of the time. But so I want that team or that person to know they had a bad month. Okay. And I want them to feel what that feels like. And I think, a lot of people would be like, well, they're just going to quit. If they see how bad they are, that's demoralizing. They're just going to quit. I said, if they quit and they were the worst, why is that a bad thing? Number one.
Yeah.
And if they don't quit and they call the crew captain from Team Beef Sticks and they say, hey, what the hell are you doing? Because I can't get a streak of 5. Can you help me out? And he's like, dude, you got to give everybody time goals right away. You got to post the time goals, and you got to make sure the time goals are visible, and then you got to hold them accountable to them. And all of a sudden he goes from the worst to the middle, and then better, and then better. Right? We all suck at something. We all make mistakes, myself included. But it's a matter of, are you okay sitting there? Or visibility creates now the leader doesn't even have to coach this guy. The guy's coaching himself. He's calling the best crew captain. So it has really allowed on some of our Slack channels, and then behind the scenes, some of our our team members that have bad performances to not necessarily go to their boss, but they just go to the person that they now see is the best, and they ask insightful questions. So it's almost like, we're creating a culture of how do we together become better? And who's the best. He's right there. You can see it on the scoreboard. So anyway, I think that drives a lot of engagement.
That was incredible, man. There was no shot I was going to interrupt you as you were running through that. And it's incredibly well. First of all, naming the crew, like giving the crew chief the ability to name their crews or have a team name is so interesting. I mean, that creates such a good culture, I would imagine, in the Slack groups and all of that, and creates such a positive environment for what can otherwise be a pretty stressful component of the process, because it's so time oriented, it's so go 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 from a renovation turnover standpoint. Two follow-ups, and then we're going to switch gears. But the first is, I think every multifamily operator out there, property management company owner, whoever, just is constantly bitching about how hard it is to find good help, right? Especially on the maintenance side, especially on the construction side. What does that process look like for you guys as it relates to hiring either techs or for example, Rent Tech 1, Rent Tech 2's, crew chiefs, et cetera, blue collar positions, folks that are getting in the unit and actually swinging hammers? Do you have some special sauce there that's enabled you to help scale that side of the business?
Yeah, I love this question. I'm super passionate about this answer too. So, we've taken a very different approach than most people. Most people in my industry are going to hire somebody that are already skilled, that already have it, and they're going to pay them a lot of money because you need to. There's just not a lot of trade people, like you said. Yeah. We took a different approach. Instead of we could have spent a lot of money and hired people that already had the skills. Instead, we took a lot of money and we spent the time creating a tech school, a university, and really put a lot of money into development and training programs within our company. And then we hired people with very little skill, and we hired people with great attitude, great work ethic, and honestly, people that would consistently show up. And it's so interesting, right? You could pay, $40,000 and go to a tech school to learn some of this stuff, or we can pay you like $40,000 to $50,000, and we can teach you this stuff. And we just really spent a ton of money on these training programs and these trainers, so that we could bring people into our company and do all the training. Now, don't get me wrong, we have licensed plumbers and electricians and general contractors. So, over time, obviously, we bought some of that. But 75% of our company, I would say, especially in the construction work center, came with very, very little. And we would do things like this, right? So if you're a service tech, we're going to train you on all the basics. For example, in Wisconsin right now, it's really hot and humid. So we just know that when an AC goes out, we need to make sure that all of our techs knows the top 5 ways to troubleshoot an AC before we just get a new one, right? Mm-hmm. We're going to make sure that our service techs can change a garbage disposal and, put in a toilet, like basic plumbing things too. But they probably aren't going to know how to change out a furnace. They probably aren't going to be able to put in a water heater. We would call that a service tech 2. And if you are in the top 25 percentile of all service techs, and you've worked at our company for over 6 months, and we can measure this, right? Because we have the scoreboards. Well, then you become eligible, if you would like to, become a service tech 2. And you click a button on our learning management system, and it gives you all these classes. And now you get to learn by reading the steps and watching the videos of what it's like to have a certification 2 for plumbing, so you know how to put in a water heater. And then you get to watch the next water heater that goes out. You get to watch somebody that is licensed be able to do it, and that is certified be able to do that. And then you get to do it while they watch you. And then eventually you get signed off to do that. And if you sign off all the certifications for a Service Tech 2, then we promote you and we give you more money. And that's worked out really, really well for us, because in these, I think that we have a lot less turnover, because the people that had great work ethic, that have been able to get promoted and have got, they're thankful and they're more loyal. Sometimes you hire a tradesman that does know everything, but 2 things happen. Once they're not very loyal. So the next guy that, offers them $1 more per hour, they're gone. And then I would also tell you, a lot of the people that have those skills, at least we have found, aren't willing to do some of the intangibles and change their way. Like, for example, our service techs are scored on experience too. And if your garbage disposal goes out, do you picture a really friendly person knocking on that door that knows how to fix everything? Of course you don't. You picture probably an old crabby guy right? That's there that just wants to get in and out. Well, that's not acceptable at our company. So we've also found like some of our core values, like unparalleled experience. It's a lot easier to be able to teach a lot of these skills, certify them, even pay for schooling and different licenses to help our team members be able to grow. So that's Axel. We haven't had any issues with hiring. It's kind of like this. If you think about it from this standpoint, I have a friend that owns a restaurant, and he once came up to me. He's like, "Dude, we can't find help. Like, we can't find help." That's what a lot of people say. And I go, "I'm just curious, like, why? Like, what do you?" He's like, "Well, nobody's applying for a position." I said, "Well, can you show me the job description and the responsibilities?" Line number one said 2 to 3 years of waitress or waiter experience. I'm like, dude,
Yeah.
you telling me why? Like, you're telling me if someone had a great attitude and worked hard, you can't teach them how to read a menu and walk to the table and smile? Like, and then take the plate from the kitchen and set it nicely on the table? Like, why do they need 2 or 3 years of experience? And I think, that's just the summation of my point, Axel. We're not looking for necessarily, we certainly will hire it if they're the right fit, but we've hired just a ton of people without that experience. And then we've given them that experience, which has created better retention, but also better results for us too.
Absolutely. No, and I think a lot of folks when they're hiring, right, there's the two mindsets of you can either build talent or you can buy talent, right? And I think maybe for different segments of a company, different approaches may make difference. Well, especially different segments of a company, but then also different trajectory or different components of a company's life cycle as it relates to the trajectory and where it is in the growth cycle. Sometimes it makes sense to maybe try and buy talent if you're hiring for a position where there's an abundance of educated individuals with experience, and it's not, you're not having the problem that your friend's having with hiring the waiter or the bartender or the waitress or whoever. And then sometimes, as you're describing, right, if it's challenging to hire skilled labor, you may just have to be the one to skill the labor. You may have to be the one to actually do that.
And
go ahead.
Sorry to cut you off. I would just say you're exactly right. And what I have found is most people need to buy the talent when their training or processes suck. And you need to buy a lot less talent when your training and your processes are really, really good. I mean, think about it for a second. It costs more and it's a lot harder to find an amazing person. Would you agree with that than an average person?
Yeah, 100%.
So I just think it's a lot easier if you want to scale a company to have above average or amazing processes than it is to buy a bunch of talents that's above average and amazing. Like, if you build processes that an average person then can do and achieve elite results, it's much easier to scale.
Yeah, without a doubt. So last thing before we switch topics here, you're clearly a very data-oriented individual, right? And there's in clearly tracking all kinds of data, whether it's via scoreboards, whether it's related to property performance, internal performance of the team, et cetera. I'm sure you track dozens and dozens of KPIs, and I don't want to just ask a blanket question over this because it's, we could probably do another 2 hours on that discussion. But we talked about turning over units quickly, delivering a great product in a short period of time. Let's talk about the leasing side, which in my opinion is the other most critical component of the actual operations process. And we'll try not to get too verbose because I want to make sure I touch on one thing before I get you out of here. But related to KPIs that you are reviewing on the leasing side of the business, whether this is a leasing agent going out there and leasing, whether there's somebody in a higher level management position overseeing a group of leasing agents, maybe just off your head, kind of off the cuff, what are some of the most important things that you're tracking? Let's call it 3 KPIs that you find to be the most critical as it relates to evaluating the success of the leasing side of the house in terms of the property management sector.
Yeah. By the way, I was the first leasing agent in our company for way too long. You got to know how to sell. So I guess the top 3 on just the leasing side, I would say, would be occupancy rate. I love looking at the move in, move out trade outs report.
Yeah.
Most people know that on this call, but in particular, what I'm looking at is not just like the number. Like last month, we had, I'm going to post this too, so I'm sure I'll butcher the numbers, but I think we had 197 people move out and 251 move in. So we had a 54 count spread on more move-ins than move-outs, which is a company record. That's huge. Like, anytime you can have more people moving in than moving out is a positive thing. But in particularly, what we look at is obviously the lost gain to rent. So like if you had somebody move out for $1,000, but then the person that moved in for $1,400, that's a plus 400. So if you look at that, right, on 254 move-ins, what is the average trade-out number? And we're always tracking that because obviously our goal is to continue to run these properties better and give more value. If you give more value, you should get more value. So I'd say that's for sure the second biggest thing that I would look at. And I guess if I had to do a third, one of the things that we measure our leasing team on is for every good push goal, there's a pull goal. So then we would track the amount of new people we put into a unit that leads to delinquency. So I think it's a really important metric, right? So if you're looking at, putting in a lot of people, and then you're looking at, anyone can put in a lot of people. I mean, we signed 212 leases in May. Well, that's great. But if you didn't do it by raising the trade outs, right? By putting in a higher rent, well, you gave too many discounts, or, you lowered the rent. So you get both of those in one or two, but what you don't get is like, you also just put in bad residents for a higher rent. So we also track I think it's 6 months. So if you are a leasing agent and you put somebody in and for some reason it leads to delinquency, eviction, whatever, within 6 months, you are actually penalized for that. So, and we actually it affects their incentives. So I take a look at how many we have and what that looks like.
That's a great incentive structure, though, especially at the scale that you're operating at, right? Where I'm sure there's obviously a dozen plus leasing agents within the organization, whatever number it is, right? There's obviously a large number of them. And there has to be some ownership over that 5 for 4,000 units. All right, I have to dig into this. So 5 for 4,000 units is one per, whatever that is, 800 or so units. Am I interpreting that correctly? And then most folks would say that that's a healthy ratio as it relates to, one leasing agent can handle 3, 4, 500 units. You obviously have one per 8. Is that due to the consolidated nature of the portfolio at this point? You got a lot of units and a short, small number of addresses, or are you doing some other things on the leasing side that allows one leasing agent to oversee such a large portion of the portfolio?
Some of the reason that our results are elite, we've never been above 1% in delinquency. We've always been really quick with service requests. Last month we answered 5,300 phone calls, and we only missed 24 of those by answering on the second ring. A lot of these metrics that are really, really elite is because we manage the properties by building out work streams of specialists and not generalist. So for example, if you have most leasing agents or most properties that have 100 units have a property manager that also does leasing, right? But they also, we expect them to be, by the way, these property managers, we expect them to be sales, right? Understand sales. We expect them to be legal experts doing delinquency. We expect them to coordinate with general contractors, do move outs, walk the property. We give them 40 different things and expect them to be great at all of them. And that's a generalist. So at our company, nobody can do more than 3 things. So our leasing agents, that's all they do is sales, which is why they can do many more. Our service techs don't rehab units. They don't cut the grass. All they do is fix things. So our average service tech can do 500 units when the most average service techs can only do 100 at other companies. They can do 500. So we have more units, but we have less things for them to do, which creates expertise. So yeah, that's all they do. And then I'd be remiss if I didn't say, Axel, we do a ton of virtual move-ins. Baby boomers aren't the number one renters anymore, right? It's millennials, it's Gen X, Gen Z. A lot of these people that are moving in, the last thing they want is a leasing agent walking them through their units, selling them. All right. Yeah. I'll tell you. So what we do is, we get great pictures. We usually stage the pictures so they can see what it's like. We pay for Matterports, and we even get a video. So, on these Matterports, you can even measure the door frame. So, if your king size bed can get in. And then again, since we use literally the same rehabs, right? With very little variation, we can sell that to somebody without actually walking one, or they could walk a different one, on a property nearby and be like, yeah, this is basically what your unit's going to look like. So I don't know, man. I would say for sure over 90, maybe 95% of our move-ins never actually walk their unit that they're moving into. It's all done virtually. And that creates a lot of speed and allows our leasing agents to not have to go to the property and do these walkthroughs and do these things. Now, of course they will when the resident wants, but It's fascinating, man. Even our move-ins now, like our move-ins used to be like, even in all of 2023, they're all like in person, like on site. Like last month, I think it was, we're for sure, again, like 98% selected virtual move-ins. Like our renters want convenience. Like they
Yeah.
don't want to be inconvenienced. So like come in and have somebody read you about your lease, or let's jump on a Google Meets and I'm going to screen share with you your apartment. I'm going to tell you where to park. I'm going to tell you where the laundry is. I can actually walk you through it, and you could do that from the comfortability of your car. I know you got a U-Haul behind you. Like the last thing is you want to go sit down in an office and like me read you the lease. No, first of all, I can send you the actual video that I pre-recorded. I can allow you to ask me questions. We can just jump on a Google Meet. So it's all about like, I think we've done a good job adapting to some of the technology too that has allowed us to be able to do more with less.
Yeah, without a doubt. No, I mean, we leverage self showings and virtual move-ins in our business too. I mean, we don't operate nearly as many units as you do. We're at about 600 right now, but we have one leasing agent for 600. She feels like she's getting stretched thin, and a big reason is we have a scattered site portfolio of properties, ranging from call it 5 to 30 units in size. So it's a little bit more of a challenge, but in general, it's important to leverage some level of tech in the leasing process, whether it's answering preliminary questions, screening applications, actually working through the listing process, getting photos taken for one unit type and then using those same photos for all of those same, similar unit types in the building and saving all that time so you can, put up as coming soon with the right photos, all that stuff. So that's great. Last thing I want to touch on before we get you out of here. So 4,000 units plus, how do you think about holding versus selling versus, in terms of the business plan for a deal? Are you somebody who wants to hold everything? I'm sure you've sold properties over the years, but how do you think about it when as you're growing your portfolio? How do you think about from an investment thesis standpoint, the decision you're making as it relates to, is this something I'm going to get in and out of? Is this something I want to hold forever? Et cetera. I think just your general thought process around that's probably going to be helpful for folks.
Yeah, that sounds good, Axel. I'm a very, very heavy buy and hold. So I hold almost everything. I've sold almost nothing. And I still look at that sometimes like, I mean, I must have somewhere between 70, 80 duplexes yet, because that's all I could afford when I was scaling up to be able to buy. So somebody would be like, "What, dude, you should just like sell those and then trade into something else." But I would tell you, just like, over time, I look back at some of those, and since I don't have investors and I don't really care about an IRR. It's just really interesting to see how much appreciation and what inflation has done to some of those properties. Like properties that I bought, like we said a decade ago, are worth 3 to 4 times more. It's just nuts, and I'm bullish that I think real estate is going to continue, right, to appreciate like it has over the years. So I think if you hold it, and you do it, and you're confident that the property management company that you've hired, and it's still your job to hold them accountable. There's good third-party management companies out there. There really is. You got to understand how to hold them accountable. So you need to understand a little bit about the processes and kind of create those with the third-party management company. But yeah, my best advice for the people listening is I would say, I think wealth is built through equity. And I think there's a reason that Warren Buffett always preaches hold, 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 and same with Charlie Munger. And I think that equity growth, which is tax free, by the way, is very, very valuable. And I think one of the coolest things about real estate is that you don't need to sell the asset to be able to reap some of the benefits, right, of that, changing in value. So today I actually did 3 refis today, just before this. And I was able to pull out $3.5 million worth of money tax free. And it's like, why would I sell it? The property still cash flows. My debt service credit ratio is after refis of 1.3. My LTV is like a 64% still. Like the asset still cash flows. I just pulled out $3.5 million worth of money. And so now I get this reoccurring cash flow, all the appreciation that comes with it later. I have access to money to be able to buy other deals. So I think like, to me, because of the opportunity to refi this asset, maybe for me, I would have had to sell properties to scale if there wasn't a thing called the refi, right? Mm-hmm. Because there's no way to pull out all that money that you're putting into it. But Man, I think real estate has so many benefits just for holding it. And of course, I'd be remiss if I said there's a lot of ways to be able to scale. And I'm sure my cash on cash or IR percentages could look differently if I would get in and get out. But every decision that I make in a property when I acquire it is to give value to the people that are going to be there before I take it, and then understand that I am going to die with this property. So I think it just makes me create better decisions around quality and the standards that we want to do too.
Love it, man. That's great. All right, truly last one here. What's next for you? Do you have some goals here over the next few years? I mean, you're obviously you own and operate a massive portfolio. You have a large business, both on the management side and the construction side, overseeing all of this. You've probably put yourself in a position where you're working on really what you enjoy working on, would be my assumption at this point. Is the goal to keep growing the portfolio, to do something else? What do the next few years for you look like?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. So I think from there's a few different goals. Like from a management standpoint, I'm probably most upset with like how do we kind of disrupt this industry and provide incredible value for the people that rent with us. So, you know, really making sure that we do things like not just cutting the grass, but like let's edge it, let's landscape it, let's fertilize it, let's not just do work orders, but let's do it in 24 to 48 hours. Let's just like change the industry by creating like an Amazon like speed and a Disney World like details on experience. And so that I'm really proud of what I own. I guess is the best way to say that. So like, I think that's important. And I think the people that pay good rent deserve that. And it makes sense. So from a property management company, I still think we got a long ways to go to give residents the experience, speed, and overall standards that they deserve. And I'm really focused on that with my president right now. And then from I've acquired a couple other businesses or like minority equity stakes in businesses. So I joined a hard money lender out of Nashville and a couple others. And I'm really enjoying that too. So just like I don't run the business, like I don't want to building a business and
You got enough
scaling
on your
business.
plate, man. Jesus. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's just really hard. It's just so I don't
Yeah.
want to run a business anymore, but I do find a lot of value in giving strategic, direction or, helping with complicated maybe people issues and process issues. And if I can just do that a little bit and then own a stake of equity in that company, I think that's exciting. And then my wife and I are working on a foundation. So working on like how do we give out free education, creating programs for people that may have not, like me, like didn't understand how to achieve financial freedom or don't understand how to get into real estate. And we're buying homes and we're renovating homes and then giving it to a family at a 0% mortgage interest. So I think that's a big part of the foundation and just some stuff like that. And my biggest goal now, like Axel, to be honest with you, is like I got a 9-year-old and a 7-year-old, and I am having a freaking blast like coaching them. Like I'm coaching them in basketball and soccer, and so I'm looking forward to spending a lot more time with them as well too. So trying to,
Love it.
I don't, yeah,
That's fantastic, man. No, this is all great. I think, first of all, the idea of buying, renovating homes and selling off at 0% with 0% interest rates that's such a great direct way to have an impact on a community. Especially now where it is becoming so incredibly challenging to get into home ownership for so many folks. Whole nother topic for another podcast, but I just really admire that initiative, that objective, because I think that's, obviously any type of philanthropy is obviously helpful and impactful, but that is something that has such a direct, immediate impact on somebody's life that you can truly see as well and measure. That's really interesting. I think that's a great initiative. Logan, this has been a killer episode, man. I really appreciate the time. I personally learned a ton here. I'm sure everyone listening learned even more. Where can folks reach out to you if they want to connect with you or learn more about what you guys got going on?
Yeah, you can check out my website, just loganrankin.com. I'm on Twitter and Instagram as well too. Just comment if you guys want to know anything. And my best advice is there's a lot of ways to be able to make money in real estate. So like do whatever you're passionate with. I don't want to turn anyone, like if you're great at raising money and you can hold a third party management company accountable, like I think there's a lot of wealth to be made that way too. But you gotta take a few risks and take a few chances. But the number one thing you're going to have to do is, if you really want to create substantial wealth, is when you buy that asset, when you buy that business, sure, I've done creative financing and structured debt a little bit differently and stuff like that in the past. But the number one way I've been able to scale and that I recommend for everybody, you still got to understand how to operate the real estate. You still got to be able to take the business that you bought on day one and figured out how to make the business more valuable. And the difference between what you bought it for and the value that you created is how you're going to create the most amount of wealth. It's not just like buying it and then selling it in a couple of years and moving up rents $50. So that's like my best advice overall today.
Love it. I mean, again, incredible episodes. We'll link to Logan's website in the show notes. But again, thanks for the time, man. This has been a killer episode.
Thanks, man. Thanks for having me on, Axel.